There's a character that Jesus meets who had two disabilities. He was deaf and mute. This man had difficulty hearing. I had difficulty speaking, which is almost a consequence, not the disability. One complements the other. In this case here, I find it interesting how Judge 1 interferes in this man's life. Look it up. Jesus left the region of Tyre again, passed through Sidon, and continued on to the Sea of Galilee, crossing the region of the Decapolis. Then they brought to him a man who was deaf and could barely speak, and they asked him to place his hands on him, taking him aside, away from the crowd. Jesus put his fingers in his ears, spat with the saliva, and touched his tongue, and looking up to heaven, he sighed and said, "Fatal, what does this mean? Be opened." Immediately, the man's ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he began to speak correctly. Jesus insistently recommended that they not tell what had happened to anyone. That's all. The more he insisted, the more they announced it. Filled with great admiration, he said, "He has done everything good. He makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. I also need it. It is to be healed in my ability to listen. Sometimes I listen very badly. I listen, but I am not listening. I need to have the sensitivity to feel with the other. Maybe you also live the same limit as me. Do you also notice this limit in yourself? You are not always able to get involved with what the other is saying, and that is why you do not take it seriously. Many transformations have stopped happening in your life. You have stopped contributing to the family functioning because you do not care to listen to what others are saying. You just listen. But there was nothing. And sometimes your marriage, your family relationship, your affiliation, your motherhood, your fatherhood, your brotherhood, your friendship, it could be much better. If you have the courage to let the scales fall from your ear and also be healed in the way you speak, it could be that you are hurting others a lot when you speak. It could be that your speech is very arrogant. You are very full of reason. If you don't gain much from it, on the contrary, sometimes you lose the trust of the other. It is very difficult to believe in an arrogant person. When we are arrogant, we lose our authority. Do we lose the ability to communicate? Nobody likes to listen to an arrogant person. Sometimes we are completely right, but we are just as arrogant as we are. And when we say that we remove all authority from what we are saying, then what we say seems like a lie. We go to work relationships. We gain nothing with arrogance. Now we gain with the word of counselor, with the word of love, with the word that shows interest for solutions, for the word that shows a desire to direct the best for us. And why do we insist on them? In a format that does not help to solve. Why insist on a format of a way of being people that does not contribute in any way? In the environments where we frequent, shall we let the arrogance of words fall to the ground? Let us learn from the most loving formats. And I say it again, there's a way of saying heavy, serious, grave things in a light way, in a loving way. We gain a lot of trust from others when we give up our arrogance. That is true leadership. The leader is the one who is able to convince others of the good that he proposes in a light and serene way. And it is very good for us to be led by people like this, who are capable of provoking, of proposing challenges, but with lightness. That is why we are fascinated by the word of Jesus, who continues to motivate us to do very difficult things. Why don't we change a comma of what Jesus proposed to us? The word of the gospel continues to be hard. The proposal he made to us continues to be very difficult. But he did it in such a loving way, in such a caring way, so merciful, that even today we continue to believe in the possibility that this proposal will only do us good. As today's gospel tells us, Jesus went about doing good. That's all he did. Good. When did he hear and when did he say? Let's want the same thing. Let's do the same way. Because we will do a lot of good to those who pass by us, or because we listen, right? Or because we said what needed to be said. The salvation of others often depends on our ability to listen, on our ability to say. And our salvation also comes to us when someone listened to us in the right way, or told us what we needed. There was interesting because we are in a time where we are very willing to listen. We want to talk. Do we talk a lot? Sometimes we listen little. And why do we listen little? we miss the opportunity to find solutions, or even to correct. Opportunity to find solutions, or even to correct some rough edges between us. Ruben Alves used to say this. Where did he see so many advertisements for public speaking courses? To teach people how to speak. Course to teach how to speak in public, to have good rhetoric, to know how to argue. But he didn't know about a listening course, a portfolio that teaches us how to listen. When do we lose the ability to listen to others? And when do we lose the willingness to listen to others? We compromise our relationships a lot. A large part of the conflicts we face at home is because we have forgotten how to listen. And when I say listen, my people, it is creating the ambience so that what needs to be said is said. Because sometimes we even say it, but in the wrong way. We shout what should be said with patience, with tranquility, with serenity. And because of that, we don't resolve the issues. And it is interesting because when I don't know how to listen, I naturally provoke in others an unwillingness to listen to me too. When does Jesus give man back this ability to listen? He is giving it back to him, to people. This is very interesting to identify. What the Avaya part, what made it difficult to be with others, of having qualified relationships. And when I say qualified relationships, I mean relationships that do us good, that make us grow, because salvation comes to us through our ears. Did you know that? Through the word that transforms us. And God saves us through the words of well-intentioned people who love us. But if we don't listen to these people, how am I going to enjoy the saving benefit that comes to me through the words of others? It's so good, isn't it? When you start talking to someone who, even knowing that you have defects, starts talking about your qualities. Have you ever experienced the therapeutic power of a motivational word? Of someone who, for a moment, makes you forget everything that was a failure in your life and starts guiding you through words of arguments. What's this? What nonsense? You have so many values and you start to open roads before your eyes that until then, alone, you could not see because you were only able to see your mistakes. You were only able to see the life that had not worked out. You were unable to see the future. You had only seen the past. Suddenly, that friend, that word that was motivating you, that was sowing dreams within you, is the same as when someone realizes that we have a talent for something, and we were afraid to say that we want to develop it. That talent, you hear that compliment, and it fills you with hope. I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to dedicate myself so that this talent can come. Okay, Jesus had a great ability to lift the burden from others, as I said, with the Samaritan woman, through a conversation. He leads a Samaritan woman through a process, along a path, right, along a road, that frees that woman from everything that until then caused agony, pain, suffering, guilt. That gesture of asking for water, Jesus begins to offer her some food infinitely superior to water than bread, which was precisely the food of the soul, and he provoked catharsis in that woman. But that means catharsis, purification. It's when we start to throw out our excesses. The Samaritan woman came before Jesus. She was also thirsty. She wouldn't go get it. She had no reserves in her house. She had to go in the direction of Jacob's well, which already fed her ancestors. That well, he had a religious reason for them too. For the Samaritan, it was part of Samaritan heritage. So little in life, right? So they valued it so much. Why, at that well, his ancestors had quenched their thirst. So he was going there with his vessel to fetch water. It was noon, a very hot day, and she came across Jesus. It was then that he began to ask her for water. I am the one that Jesus actually wanted. It was just to start a conversation. Good morning. Are you thirsty too? The unusual happened. He talked to a woman who was also thirsty for water, physically, but above all, for life. She was thirsty. She was on her sixth marriage, a life that had gone wrong. And Jesus, realizing this, began to talk to her, began to value her. And sometimes there are people who have been trying to tell us for a long time, trying to talk to us, and we do not create the inner disposition, or even the outer one, because depending on the face we make to the other, We know exactly that they cannot say anything to us, and then we become deaf, even though we have the ability to hear. Even though we have the ability to hear. Do we continue to be deaf, or is it that deafness? And the other person tells us the truth. The other person says everything. Person tells us the truth. The other person says everything we need to hear to improve, to change our lives. And we interpret that as an affront, as an insult. Don't you know how to listen? Because sometimes what irritates us isn't it that the other person told us the truth? It's that we don't want to assume that the other person told us the truth. So we listen. We get irritated by what the other person says to us. It's not because he wasn't right. No, it's because he was absolutely right that we know that, but we don't want to assume that he was right in what he said. So, does our deafness also manifest itself there? I heard perfectly. The other person was able to tell me what he needed to say, and I didn't consider the truth of what he was saying to me. Did I not realize that those words could help me overcome what I need to overcome? Listening with reluctance, listening with laziness, listening thinking that the other person is saying it just to annoy me, just to disturb me. Deafness. Am I deaf? I am not able to perceive the voice that guides me. I am not able to decode the voice of God that speaks through the human voice. That is why the first gesture, the first great miracle that Jesus performed in people's lives, was to change what that heart said. My conversion is like this. I change what I hear from that heart because I free it from excesses, and then God begins to have a direct channel with me. He begins to have easier access to me because my heart, this bridge through which he passes and arrives or not. Everything will depend on what I do with this heart, that we are all victims of ourselves. We all carry this burden of not always doing the good that we know we should do. So I am going through this purification. I am transforming my heart, my mind, the light of this gospel that is demanding of me, that really demands of me daily. So it is interesting when you look at what makes you suffer. Will you identify a way of thinking about things? And when you are willing to change the way you think about things, you begin a purifying suffering that will pull you out of that oppressive process that you've been in until then. As I gave the example of jealousy, go back to it. A person who is driven by jealousy has no peace. They live to observe what the other is doing. Who was with them? Who went with them? Who stopped going? Who did they talk to? Who did they stop talking to? And the person will feel like they're being overlooked, right? She imagines herself like that from the moment she did it. No, it doesn't make sense for me to think like that. The other person has the right to have their own life, and I will be there. I will participate according to my possibilities and the openness that I can achieve. Then, naturally, you start to think differently about the other person and you. When I have a heart that is favorable to me, when my heart is converted, I won't need to make much effort to want good. That's fantastic, my people. We identify that conversion, true conversion makes goodness natural in us. That we don't always do the good that we want because of lust. A difficult word, right? That speaks of something very simple, which is lust, the natural tendency that we have to make mistakes. And that's what conversion is. It's you putting some control over lust. It's you identifying that you have a fragility that needs care. I always like this example. Fragility can't scare us. It's like a crystal. I have a piece in my house that is precious. So I have to keep it in a way that it's not exposed to the risks of being treated in any way, right? Why? Because it is made of crystal. Is it fragile? So what is fragile indicates to me that there will be greater care. We do not have rough souls. We have fragile souls. That is why within us, we need to constantly go through the experience of care, the experience of compassion, the experience of love, action. Because if we do not put love in this heart, if we do not convert our heart, wanting good, it will always be a painful process for us. Doing good will always be a painful process, and it cannot be like that. From the moment we assume Christianity as a proposal for life, doing good should be a satisfaction, a pleasure. I truly believe, my people, that the more God takes possession of our heart, the greater our capacity to reflect. That is why we are followers of a religion that teaches us reflection. That is why we are not followers of a blind theology. We are not followers of a blind, infertile spirituality because it makes no sense. Anyone who is willing to follow in the footsteps of Jesus has that we are willing to live daily reflection, because even the analysis of our life goes through the reflection we make of it. If I stop reflecting on myself, I lose my commitment to myself, and stop reflecting on myself, I lose my commitment to myself and naturally compromise the social fabric that needs my human quality. Because when we are truly before Jesus, a stripping, first he makes us throw everything on the floor, just like he did with the rich young man. You have to be empty-handed to be before Jesus. Forget everything you have. Forget it. That will be of no use in the first encounter. Only if you truly meet Jesus is he stripped. Everything you think you have achieved up to this day, the richer a person becomes spiritually, the emptier. They feel not in the sense of having no meaning in life, but it creates more space inside so it can receive more. Unlike hoarders. Have you ever seen those programs that show hoarders? It's so sad, isn't it? You can look at it and make your own judgment. How can a person live in an environment? In an environment so saturated with material objects? Well, it's a disease. It's an imbalance. That's the high point of an exacerbated attachment to matter. But there are people who seek this happiness in matter. It goes beyond what is necessary for us. Yes, happiness involves material needs. It's very good for us to have. But having, if it is not covered with spiritual realities, with spiritual meanings, becomes just a burden, because it is having without spirituality. It is having without spiritual meaning, because I can very well cover what life has given me through my work with spiritual meanings. In my house, for example, it stops being a burden to me when it becomes a place of my true rest, the place where I find my peace, my tranquility. Where do I recover from my tiredness? And where? I put the people I love. It is not just a house to be beautiful. No, it is a house to have spiritual meaning. That is where it is. The people who pass through there love each other. Everyone who frequents the house. And they become part of a spiritual happiness. Our relationship with our employees is not so beautiful when you enter a house and you realize that there is respect for the other. It is in the small details. The other is not seen as just an object to satisfy needs. No, the other is a being that is part of the joy of my house. It is not only because of the service he does for me that he values me. No, it is not. It is because of the satisfaction of having him with me. I could have many employees and he could have many bosses, but he chose me, I chose him, and this becomes part of a spiritual happiness. Are you accompanied by people you have learned to love and that you have incorporated into your life? Sometimes we can only overcome a phase of life after we have been able to share it with someone. After sharing, it is as if we can move forward in the direction of improvement, overcoming. In psychology itself, we learn that it's the time we have the courage to talk about a certain reality that until then was only kept by us. It belongs to those secrets that we never had the courage to tell anyone. Somehow, we started to overcome it. The taste of flavor, it can often make a reality worse. When do I share? I have the conditions to take steps towards overcoming it. That's why conversation is always therapeutic. The Samaritan woman was weighed down by the burdens of the past. She was even afraid to tell that she had had so many husbands, that she had made so many mistakes in her love life. What Jesus did with the Samaritan woman was to remove from her the burdens that prevented her from knowing who she was. And what could she do? She was in the dynamic of this music. Not every holy prayer, not all darkness is pitch black, and all beauty. Is that right? When I experience Christ, I receive him in my soul. He becomes a guest of my soul, and he begins to help me work with me to do this daily craft of my character, of my personality. Percy, it is still not like him, doing to me what perhaps no human being has been able to do. When I tell you that we are often reactive, immersed in a routine of little reflection, I think we become a bit like that. We become unable to listen, and, consequently, we become unable to speak. Then we become bestialized. Do you know when you realize that you will live every day the same? Why? We are transformed by the word. And what if we lose the ability to hear? And even when I read, I am listening. Am I listening because of this word? It has an inner voice. When I glance at the text, there's a voice telling me internally. When I am deaf because of my lifestyle, not even what I read touches me. I am so agitated, my life is so busy, that I do not have something happy, an opportunity to be touched by words. Unhappy is he who believes? Here is opportunity to be touched by words. Unhappy is he who believes? Here is the gospel that has already happened in the lives of so many people. May it happen in your life too. Let us ask that God gives us grace today to also be healed like this blind man was. Excuse me, like this deaf and mute man was.